I didn't get a birthday cake when I turned 18. I got a deadline. My father stood by the door, holding an envelope like it weighed nothing. Today, he said, I've fulfilled my promise to your mother. I remember smiling, because I thought he meant something kind, something human. But then he looked at me, really looked at me and said, "You're not my daughter." The words didn't hit all at once, they sank slowly, like cold water filling your lungs. "I agreed to raise you until you turned 18, he continued. "That promise is done." And then, he opened the door. No shouting, no anger, just an ending. $168 in my account, one suitcase, and no place left to go. 14 years later, that same man sat across from me in my office, his hands trembling, his voice smaller than I had ever heard it. "Please, save your brother." But what he didn't know was, I had already learned how to survive without him. Have you ever been treated like this? My name is Vaeloria Nix Arden, and I learned very early that being raised is not the same as being loved. The house I grew up in was always quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. There's a difference. Peace feels warm, silence like ours felt, careful, measured. Like every word had to be placed exactly right, or not said at all. My mother died when I was 10. I remember the hospital room, the way the machines beeped in uneven rhythms, the way her hand felt lighter each day, and the way my father stood at the far corner of the room, like he was already leaving. I didn't understand it back then, but I do now. He wasn't losing a wife, he was losing the reason he had agreed to keep me. Because my mother had a secret, one that shaped my entire life, without me knowing. She was already pregnant when she married him, pregnant with me, and he knew from the beginning. But he still chose to stay, not for me, for her. And before she died, he made a promise. I'll take care of her, until she turns 18, not forever, not as his daughter, just until 18, a contract, not a family. I didn't know any of that growing up. All I knew was, I tried. I studied harder than anyone else in school. I cleaned without being asked. I stayed out of trouble. I learned how to read his mood by the sound of his footsteps, and still, there was always a distance. He never hit me, never yelled, never told me I was worthless. He just never reached for me. But with my younger brother, everything was different. He laughed with him, taught him things, put a hand on his shoulder like it belonged there. I used to watch them from the stairs sometimes, not jealous, just observing, like I was watching a version of life that wasn't mine. I told myself it didn't matter. That love wasn't necessary. That survival was enough. I was wrong. The week before my 18th birthday, I got accepted into a university, not just any university, a top program for finance and economic systems, partial scholarship. I remember holding that letter, my hands shaking not from fear, but from something close to hope. For the first time, I thought, maybe this is how everything changes. Maybe this is where I finally become something. I waited until dinner to tell him. He was reading, as always. I placed the letter gently on the table. I got in. He didn't react immediately, just adjusted his glasses. Read, turned the page, read again, then placed it down. "That's good," he said. 2 words. That's all. I nodded, waited, because there was more. "There's just one thing," I added. "The scholarship doesn't cover everything." A pause. Small, but I felt it. "I need help with the rest." That was the moment, the exact moment everything shifted. He leaned back in his chair, not angry, not surprised, just resolved. "I've already made arrangements for your brother," he said. "His future comes first." I felt something tighten in my chest. "But I earned this," I said quietly. "I can work part-time. I just need a little support to start." No, one word, flat, final. I didn't argue after that, because something in his eyes told me this wasn't a discussion. This was already decided. And then, my birthday came. No cake, no celebration, just that envelope, and the truth. "You're not my daughter." I remember standing there, holding the edge of the table, not crying, not speaking, just standing. Because if I moved, I felt like I might fall apart in a way I wouldn't be able to fix. "Your mother asked me to raise you," he said. "I did. A beat. My responsibility ends today." Responsibility. Not love, not family. Responsibility. He handed me the envelope, inside cash, some documents, and a copy of my birth certificate, the father's name, blank. "I suggest you find your own way from here." I picked up my suitcase, walked to the door, stopped for just a second, not to beg, not to ask, just to look. He didn't look back. And then I stepped outside. The door closed behind me, softly, almost gently. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was, it didn't feel like something breaking. It felt like something ending exactly the way it was always meant to, and I think that hurt even more. The first night, I didn't go far. I just walked, one block, then another, like distance itself might give me an answer. It didn't. I stopped at a bus station around midnight, not because I had somewhere to go, but because it was the only place that stayed open, without asking questions. Fluorescent lights, cold plastic chairs, a vending machine humming in the corner. I sat down, placed my suitcase between my feet, and for the first time since the door closed behind me, I checked my phone. $168. That was everything I had. Not extra, not temporary, everything. I did the math. Food, a place to sleep, transportation. Every number felt like it was cutting something away, until there was nothing left to cut. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. "My responsibility ends today." By morning, I understood something very clearly. No one was coming, and that realization, it didn't break me, it simplified everything. I found the cheapest motel I could, paid for 2 nights. That alone took nearly half of what I had. The room smelled like damp walls and old fabric, but it had a lock, and for now, that was enough. The next morning, I started walking again, but this time, with purpose. I printed copies of my resume at a small shop, simple, nothing impressive, high school graduate, part-time tutoring, basic skills. I went door to door, cafes, restaurants, retail stores, anywhere that might need someone, anywhere that didn't ask too many questions. Most places didn't even look up. Some took the paper, some didn't. One manager glanced at me and said, "Come back when you have experience." I nodded, like that made sense. By the end of the day, my legs were shaking, my throat dry, and my hope thinner than it had ever been. But I kept going. On the 3rd day, I got my first yes. A small diner, nothing special, the kind of place people passed by without noticing. The owner didn't ask many questions, just looked at me for a long moment and said, "You show up on time?" "Yes." "You quit easy?" "No." He nodded. "Then you can start tomorrow." That night, I went back to the motel, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my hands. They didn't feel like mine anymore. Because something had changed, not dramatically, not visibly, but permanently. I wasn't a student anymore. I wasn't a daughter. I was on my own. The job paid barely enough, but it was something. Morning shifts, long hours, standing until my feet burned, smiling at people who didn't see me, cleaning tables, carrying trays, learning how to disappear while still doing everything right. I ate what I could, saved what I could, counted every dollar like it mattered, because it did. At night, I studied, not for school, for survival. I read anything I could find, free articles, old textbooks, financial blogs, anything about money, how people made it, how they lost it, how they kept it. Because I realized something early. The people who had money played a different game, and I didn't even know the rules yet. Weeks passed, then months. The motel turned into a shared room. The shared room turned into a small space of my own. Bare, minimal, but mine. I applied for university again. Deferred my admission. 1 year. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I couldn't afford to fail. And failure, when you have no one to catch you, is different. It doesn't just hurt, it ends things. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was seeing what I had left behind. One night, after a long shift, I checked social media, something I hadn't done in weeks. And there it was. A photo. My brother, standing in front of a new car, smiling, arm around my father, caption, "New beginnings, proud of you, son." I stared at it, longer than I should have, not because I wanted that life, but because I realized it had never been mine to begin with. I closed the app, turned off my phone, and sat in the dark, no tears, just silence. And then, I made a decision. If no one was going to choose me, I would. That was the night everything started to shift, not on the outside, but inside. I stopped waiting, stopped hoping, stopped looking back, and started building, slow, quiet, deliberate. I asked more questions at work, observed people more carefully, watched how money moved, who spent, who saved, who worried, who didn't. Patterns began to form. And once you see patterns, you can't unsee them. That's when I realized I didn't just want a job, I wanted control. Because control was the one thing no one had ever given me, and I wasn't going to live the rest of my life without it. But I didn't know yet just how far that decision would take me, or who it would bring back into my life, years later. Control. That word stayed with me, not loud, not dramatic, just constant. I started noticing things other people ignored. The way certain customers at the diner dressed, the way they spoke, the way they didn't look at prices. They weren't just spending money. They were managing it. One man came in every Thursday morning. Same table, same coffee, black, no sugar, no conversation. But one day, he left a folder behind. I noticed it when I cleared the table. Thin leather, clean edges, the kind of thing you don't accidentally forget. I opened it, just a little. Inside numbers, statements, investment reports. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. This wasn't casual money. This was structured, intentional. I closed it immediately, waited. He came back 15 minutes later, not rushed, but focused. I handed him the folder, without a word. He looked at me, not like a customer, not like someone passing by, like he was measuring something. "You didn't look?" he asked. I met his eyes. I did. A pause, but I didn't take anything. Another pause, longer this time. Then, he smiled, just slightly. "What's your name?" "Vaeloria." "Unusual," he said. "I've been told." He nodded, sat down again. "Sit," he said. I hesitated. Work rules, boundaries, all the things I had learned to follow. But something about the moment felt different. So I sat. That was the first time someone spoke to me, like I was worth their time. His name was Arden Holdings. He worked in private wealth management, not for average clients, for people who didn't worry about bills, people who worried about millions. We talked for 10 minutes, maybe less. But in those 10 minutes, something shifted. He asked questions. Real ones. What I was doing, why I wasn't in school, what I wanted. I didn't tell him everything, but I didn't lie. "I'm learning," I said. "From what?" "Anything I can get my hands on." He leaned back, studied me again. "Come by my office tomorrow." Just like that. No promise, no explanation, just an opening. I almost didn't go, because hope after you've lost it once feels dangerous. But the next morning, I stood outside a building I had never imagined entering. Glass, steel, silence, Everything about it said you don't belong here. And for a second, I believed it. But then I remembered something. No one had ever thought I belonged anywhere, and I had survived anyway, so I walked in. The receptionist barely looked at me. Name? Vaeloria. I'm here to see Mr. Halden. A pause. Typing. Then, wait. I stood there, hands still, breathing slow. Minutes passed, then his voice. Let her in. His office was exactly what you'd expect. Clean, minimal, expensive without trying to be. He didn't offer me coffee, didn't waste time. I don't hire people like you, he said. Direct, cold, honest. I nodded. I figured. But, he continued, I'm curious about you. Silence. I can offer you an internship. A pause. Unpaid. Of course. You'll do whatever is needed. Filing, scheduling, observing. I didn't hesitate. I'll take it. He watched me carefully. You're not asking questions. I don't need to. Why? Because this is the closest I've been to where I need to be. Another pause. Then a small nod. Start tomorrow. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. But I sat in my small room and allowed myself one thought. Maybe, this is how it begins. The first week was invisible. No one spoke to me. No one trained me. I was just there, filing documents, organizing schedules, making copies, but I watched. Every meeting, every conversation, every detail, how they greeted clients, how they listened more than they spoke, how they never rushed decisions, how money moved before it was even mentioned. It wasn't about numbers, it was about trust and power. I started taking notes, not just what they did, but why. By the second week, I noticed something. One of the clients, an older woman, was always waiting longer than the others. Her files were pushed aside, her meetings delayed. Not because she didn't matter, but because she wasn't loud, not demanding, not urgent, which made her easy to ignore. I remembered that feeling, being present, but unseen. One afternoon, her meeting got canceled again. She sat in the waiting area, hands folded, not complaining, just waiting. Something about that felt familiar. So I walked over. Would you like some tea? I asked. She looked up surprised. That would be nice. I brought it, sat across from her, not as an employee, just as a person. We talked, nothing important, at least, that's what it seemed like, but I listened, really listened, about her late husband, about the assets she didn't fully understand, about the advisors who spoke too fast and explained too little. I didn't give advice, not yet, but I asked questions, simple ones, clear ones, and slowly, she relaxed. For the first time since I had seen her, she smiled. That conversation lasted 20 minutes, and it changed everything, but I didn't know that yet. The next day, Karen called me into his office. You spoke to Mrs. Elmere. Not a question, a statement. Yes. Why? She was waiting. A pause. That's not your job. I know. Silence. Then what did you talk about? I told him. Everything. Not to impress. Just, clearly. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Then leaned back. She requested you. That was the moment. The first shift, small, but irreversible, because from that point on, I wasn't invisible anymore, and once someone sees you, they can't unsee you. But that wasn't the most important part. The most important part was someone had trusted me with something that mattered, and I wasn't going to waste it. What I didn't know was that one small moment would be the first step toward a life my father would never recognize. Mrs. Elmere didn't look like power. That was the first thing I noticed. No designer labels, no loud presence, no urgency in her voice. Just a quiet woman, with more wealth than most people in that building, and no one was paying attention to her, except me. The next time she came in, she didn't sit in the waiting area, she asked for me. That alone changed how people looked at me. Not warmly, but differently, like I had stepped out of place. Which I had. Karen didn't interfere. He just observed. Always observing. I sat across from her again, this time, with a notepad. I don't understand what they're doing with my money, she said. Not angry, just tired. I nodded. Then we start simple. No jargon, no performance, just clarity. I asked her to walk me through everything, every account, every asset, every concern. She spoke slowly, carefully, and I listened, not to reply, to understand. That night, I went home with copies of her files, not official, not assigned, but I needed to see everything: numbers, patterns, decisions. And something didn't sit right. There were fees, hidden in complexity, allocations that didn't match her goals, movements that benefited the firm more than her. Nothing illegal, just convenient. I didn't sleep that night. I rebuilt everything from scratch, simplified, adjusted, realigned, not perfectly, but honestly. The next morning, I walked into Charon's office. I want to show you something. He raised an eyebrow. Didn't say yes, didn't say no, just waited. I laid everything out. Clear, structured, no unnecessary words, just truth. He didn't react immediately. Just flipped through the pages, once, then again, slower. You did this? He asked. Yes. Another pause. Without being asked. Yes. Silence, the kind that stretches, tests you. You're right, he said finally. 2 words, but this time, they meant something. He closed the file. Implement it. That was it. No praise, no celebration, just trust. The changes took weeks. Careful adjustments, conversations, repositioning assets, reducing fees, rebuilding strategy. And when it was done, Mrs. Elmere sat across from me again. I understand now, she said. Her voice lighter, her shoulders relaxed. How much did this save me? She asked. I told her. She didn't react immediately, just stared at me, long, then smiled. You're not staying an intern for long, she said. I didn't answer, because I wasn't thinking about titles. I was thinking about something else, something bigger. A few days later, she introduced me to someone, another client, different profile, different needs, but the same problem. They didn't feel seen. And that's when I understood something. This wasn't about money, it never was. It was about attention, clarity, trust, and those things were rare. More clients came, slowly, then faster. Not because of marketing, not because of strategy, because of results. And Charon, he watched everything, still distant, still controlled, but different. One evening, as everyone was leaving, he stopped me. You're building something, he said. Not a question, a recognition. I'm learning, I replied. He nodded. Be careful. A pause. People notice when something valuable appears. I understood what he meant. Opportunity always comes with attention, and attention is never neutral. But I didn't slow down. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't catching up. I was moving forward. Months turned into a year. The internship ended. But I didn't leave. I became something else. Not officially, but functionally. I had clients. I had responsibility. I had momentum. And momentum, once it starts, is hard to stop. But that wasn't the most important change. The most important change was inside me. I stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about growth, which meant I was no longer the girl who got pushed out of a house with $168. I was becoming someone who could build something from nothing. And that realization, it didn't feel loud. It felt steady, like a foundation being laid. But I didn't know yet how high that foundation would rise, or that one day, someone from my past would walk into my office and see it all. Growth didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started quietly. 1 client became 2, 2 became 5, 5 became enough to notice. Not enough to celebrate, but enough to change how people looked at me. I wasn't the girl filing papers anymore. I was involved. And involvement in a place like that meant power was getting closer. Charon didn't mentor me the way people imagine. No long talks, no guidance. Just exposure. He let me sit in meetings, not speak, just listen. And listening became my advantage, because people reveal everything when they think you don't matter. I learned how wealthy people think, not what they say, but what they fear: losing control, losing status, losing time. Money was never the real concern. It was what money represented. And once you understand that, you don't just manage money, you manage people. That was the shift, the real one. By my second year, I wasn't just assisting anymore. I was advising, carefully, strategically, always precise. Clients started asking for me directly, not because I was the most experienced, but because I was the most attentive. And attention, when given correctly, feels like respect, which is something most of them didn't get. Not really. One afternoon, Charon handed me a file. No explanation. Just, handle this. I opened it. Large portfolio, high-risk exposure, complex structure, a mistake, hidden under layers of confidence. I spent 3 nights on it. No distractions, no shortcuts. When I presented my solution, he didn't interrupt, didn't question, just listened. And at the end, he said something he had never said before: "You're ready." That was the moment, the line I crossed, from learning to owning. After that, everything accelerated. My income changed, slowly at first, then suddenly, not flashy, not loud, but undeniable. I moved out of my small apartment, into something quieter, cleaner, a place that didn't remind me of survival. I bought things I needed, nothing more, because I wasn't chasing wealth. I was building stability. And stability after chaos feels like luxury. But that wasn't the most important part. The most important part was, I stopped thinking about them. My father, my past, that house. They became distant, not painful, not emotional. Just irrelevant. Which is something I never thought would happen. Because I used to believe that what happened to me would define me. But it didn't. What I did after, did. Years passed, not dramatically, but consistently. And consistency builds things that luck never can. My name started appearing in places, not publicly, but within circles that mattered. Introductions changed, rooms changed, the level of trust deepened, and with that, so did my control. I wasn't just managing portfolios anymore. I was shaping outcomes, guiding decisions, protecting futures. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking for permission. I built my own firm, not big, not flashy, but precise, selective clients, strategic growth, and most importantly, independent. Because independence was the one thing no one could take from me again. But even then, I kept my life simple: routine, work, silence, no unnecessary connections, no distractions. Because I knew everything I had built came from discipline, and discipline is fragile. You lose it once, and everything starts to slip. So I didn't slip. I stayed focused, stayed controlled, stayed distant. Until the day, everything from my past walked back into my life, not gradually, not subtly, all at once. It started with a file, just another client intake, standard, routine, until I saw the name, and everything inside me went completely still. Because some names don't fade, no matter how many years pass, and this one was impossible to ignore. The name on the file was one I hadn't seen in 14 years. Not in person, not in writing, not anywhere. And yet, the moment I saw it, I knew, not because of memory, but because of what it did to my body. Everything went still. Arden Holdings, a company name, clean, professional. But beneath it, a name I recognized: Kalis Arden. My brother. I didn't react immediately, didn't call anyone, didn't ask questions. I just closed the file, sat back, and breathed, slow, controlled, measured. Because reactions in my world cost more than mistakes. I opened it again, this time, carefully, page by page, numbers, debt structures, liquidity gaps, exposure. A pattern started to form. Not bad luck, not timing, decisions, repeated ones, risk layered on risk, confidence without control. And at the center of it, a system, already collapsing. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what wasn't written, the missing pieces, the urgency behind the numbers. Because I've seen this before, not with people like him, but with clients who wait too long, and by the time they ask for help, they're not trying to grow anymore. They're trying to survive. I closed the file again, this time, more slowly. 14 years, and somehow, everything had come back. But I didn't reach out, didn't move, didn't react, because one thing I had learned is that timing is everything. And if they had come to me, it meant something had already gone wrong, badly. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, my assistant knocked on the door. Someone is here to see you. Do they have an appointment? No. A pause, he insisted. I didn't look up. Name? Silence. Then, Arden. The room felt quieter, not heavier, not emotional, just focused. Send him in. I stood up, not because I needed to, but because control starts before the conversation begins. The door opened, and for a moment time didn't move. He looked older, of course he did, so did I, but it wasn't age that changed him, it was something else, something I had never seen before, uncertainty. He stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the room, then landing on me, and stopping. Because recognition is never instant, it builds, layer by layer, until it hits. Vaeloria. My name, in his voice, after 14 years. It didn't feel like I thought it would. No anger, no pain, just distance. Yes, a single word, clean, neutral. He took another step forward, hands slightly trembling. He stopped. Because whatever he had prepared to say was no longer enough. So he started again. Your brother. There it was. Not me, not regret, not apology. Him. His company is in trouble, he said. I didn't respond, just watched. Because silence reveals more than questions. We made some decisions, he continued. Investments that didn't work. I finished the sentence for him. He nodded, relieved, as if I had made this easier. He's not well, he added. That made me pause, just slightly. What does that mean? Another hesitation, then terminal. The word didn't echo, didn't shatter anything. It just landed, heavy. I looked at him, really looked this time, and for the first time, I saw it. Not the man who closed the door on me, but a man who had run out of options. Would you stay or walk away? Stay or walk? I've reviewed the file, I said. His eyes widened slightly. So you know I know enough. I walked back to my desk, picked up the file. Your company is over-leveraged, I continued. Your liquidity is gone. Your risk exposure is misaligned. I placed the file in front of him. You're not here to grow. A pause. You're here because you're about to lose everything. Silence. He didn't deny it, because he couldn't. I was told, he said slowly, that you could help. Of course, that's how this always works. People don't remember you until they need you. And who told you that? I asked. A contact, someone who said, he hesitated, you're the best at what you do. I didn't react, because titles don't matter, results do. And what do you expect from me? I asked. This time, he didn't hesitate. Save him. Not the company, not the assets, him, his son. And suddenly, everything became clear. This wasn't about business. It never was. It was about time, and the fact that he was running out of it. I leaned back slightly, measured, calm, controlled. 14 years ago, he had closed a door on me. Now, he was standing in mine, and for the first time, the decision was mine. But what I didn't say, what I didn't show, was that something inside me had already started to shift. Because no matter what he had done, there was one truth I couldn't ignore. Kalis was my brother, and he had never closed that door. I didn't agree right away. I didn't refuse either. I just paused. Because decisions like this aren't made in words. They're made in silence. "Where is he?" I asked. My father exhaled, relief, too quickly. "At Street Viral Medical Hospital, of course." I nodded once. "Give me an hour." He looked like he wanted to say something else. Maybe thank me. Maybe explain. But I had already turned away. Because I wasn't ready to hear anything from him. Not yet. The drive there was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty. The kind that feels full. Of memory. Of questions. Of things I thought I had already buried. 14 years. And somehow, one name had brought everything back. But not the pain. Just the awareness. The hospital smelled the same as every hospital. Clean. Sharp. Familiar. I walked through the entrance. He was already there. Waiting. Like he had been since I left. He stood when he saw me. Not proud. Not composed. Just tired. "We're on the 3rd floor," he said. I didn't respond. Just followed. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. White walls. Soft footsteps. Muted voices. Every step felt measured. Controlled. Because I knew, whatever I was about to see, was going to matter. And I didn't allow things to matter easily anymore. We stopped outside a room. He didn't open the door immediately. "He doesn't know you're coming," he said. I looked at the door, then at him. Does he know I exist? The question landed harder than I expected. He hesitated. Yes. A pause. But not like this. Of course, not as someone who could walk in and change everything, just a name, a past. I opened the door, and for a moment everything slowed. Because the person in that bed was not the boy I remembered. Kalis had always been strong, confident, loud in a way I never was, but the man lying there was quieter, thinner, still. Machines hummed softly around him. A monitor traced his heartbeat, slow, but steady. His eyes were closed. And for the first time, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. Vulnerability. Not the kind people show. The kind they can't hide. I stepped closer. Not fast. Not hesitant. Just present. And then his eyes opened. He looked at me. Not confused. Not surprised. Just searching. "You're her," he said. His voice was weaker than I expected, but clear. I didn't ask what he meant, because I knew. "I'm Vaeloria," I said. A small nod. "I know." Of course he did. Silence settled between us, not awkward, just honest. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't either. The truth. Simple." He smiled slightly. "I guess that makes 2 of us." I pulled a chair closer, sat down, not as a stranger, not as family, just as someone who chose to be there. "They told you?" I asked. He nodded. "Enough." Another pause. "I made mistakes," he said. "No defense, no excuses, just acceptance." "That's not why you're here," I replied. He looked at me. "No," he said. "It's not." I studied him for a moment, because something felt different, not in the situation. In him, he wasn't like our father, not in the way that mattered. "What's the diagnosis?" I asked. He hesitated, then advanced. A beat. Unpredictable. Another beat. Limited time. The words didn't shock me, because I had already seen it. In his face. In the way he moved. In the silence between his breaths. But hearing it made it real. And reality demands decisions. I can help with the company, I said. He shook his head slightly. That's not why I wanted you here. I paused. Then what? I wanted to meet you, he said. Simple, unexpected. I've heard about you, he added. Not from him. A small shift in his gaze. From others. I didn't respond, because I didn't know how. Not to that. They said you built everything yourself, he continued. I looked away. Something like that. Another silence. Then, I'm glad you did, he said. That was the moment. The crack. Small, but real. Because for the first time in 14 years, someone from that family was looking at me, without expectation, without judgment, without distance, just seeing me. And I realized something then. I wasn't here for my father. I never was. I was here for him. Because whatever had happened in the past, he hadn't been the one to close that door, and now he was the one running out of time. Would you forgive them? Yes or no? I stood up slowly. I'll review everything, I said. The company, the structure, the options. He nodded. Thank you. I turned toward the door, but before I left I stopped. Not for long, just enough. To be clear, I said quietly, I'm not doing this for him. A pause. I know, he replied. And somehow, that made it easier. As I stepped out into the hallway, my father was there, waiting, like he had been all along. But this time, everything was different, because I had already made my decision, and it had nothing to do with him. I didn't go home that night. I went back to my office, because emotions can wait, but timing can't. I placed the Arden file on my desk again, opened it, this time, not as someone remembering the past, but as someone controlling the outcome. Numbers don't care about history. They don't remember who hurt you. They don't forgive. They don't hesitate. They just reveal the truth. And the truth was simple. Arden Holdings was already collapsing. Not visibly, not publicly, but structurally. Debt stacked on weak projections. Assets tied to unstable markets. Short-term decisions, covering long-term damage. And at the center of it, careless. Not reckless. Not stupid. Just unprepared. Raised to believe things would work out, because they always had, until they didn't. I mapped everything, line by line, exposure, liquidity, risk, and then I built a plan, not to grow, to survive. Step 1. Stop the bleeding. Freeze non-essential spending. Liquidate unstable assets. Reallocate remaining capital. Step 2. Rebuild structure, simplify, cut complexity. Step 3. Control narrative. Because perception in business is as valuable as reality. And if people believe you're collapsing, you already are. I worked through the night. No interruptions, no distractions, just focus. Because this wasn't just another client. This was a decision. And I don't make those lightly. By morning it was done. Not perfect, not easy, but possible. I scheduled a meeting. Not with my father, with the board. Because if I was stepping in, it would be on my terms. The room was exactly what I expected, controlled tension, polite expressions, hidden panic, people who knew something was wrong, but didn't want to say it out loud. Until I did. You're already insolvent, I said. Silence. No one argued, because they knew. You've been managing perception, I continued. Not reality. A shift in posture, eyes lowering. That stops today. I placed the documents on the table. This is the only path forward. One of them leaned in, flipped through the pages. How long do we have? He asked. I met his eyes. Less than you think. Another silence. Then and you can do this? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because confidence isn't about speed. It's about certainty. Yes, one word, enough. The room shifted, not emotionally, strategically, because they understood something now. Control had changed hands. I didn't ask for permission. I defined terms, full oversight, decision authority, no interference. If they wanted survival, they accepted. If not, they collapsed. Simple. They accepted. Of course they did. Because when people are desperate, they don't negotiate. They comply. Implementation started immediately. Assets moved. Decisions executed. Resistance appeared. Of course it did. But resistance only matters when it has power, and I had already taken that. Days turned into weeks. The structure stabilized, not strong, but standing, which was more than it had been. And through all of it, I didn't see him, my father, not once, because this wasn't about him, not anymore. But Kalis, I checked on him, not often, but enough. Each time, he looked a little weaker, but a little lighter too. Because something had shifted, not in the numbers, in the outcome. One evening, I walked into his room again. He looked at me. "You did it, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't answer, because results don't need to be announced. He smiled anyway. "I can tell," he said. I sat down, not close, not distant, just there. "They said the company is stabilizing," he added. "They said you're the reason." A pause. "They say a lot of things," I replied. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Still," he said quietly, "thank you." That word felt different coming from him. Not heavy, not loaded, just real. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not because he was okay, but because he knew things were being handled. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about saving a company. It was about giving him time. And time is the only thing money can't guarantee. But that wasn't the end, because there was still one conversation left, one that had been waiting for 14 years, and now there was no reason to avoid it anymore. He didn't come to my office again. Not after the first time. Not after he realized this wasn't a conversation he could control. So I went to him. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because some things don't end on their own, they wait for you to finish them. He was in the hospital lobby, same place, same chair, like he hadn't moved. He looked up when he saw me. And for a moment, I saw it again, that hesitation, not authority, not certainty, just a man trying to understand where he stood. "Is it done?" he asked, straight to the point, of course. "Yes." A small exhale, relief, but not for me, never for me. "For him," he said quietly. I nodded once. "For him." Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, just unfinished. "I didn't expect you to help," he said after a while. I didn't respond, because expectations were never something he gave me, so I didn't return them. "You had every reason not to," he continued. That made me look at him, because that was the first honest thing he had said. "I didn't do it for you," I replied, calm, controlled, clear. He nodded. "I know." A pause. "I never thought you would." That answer landed differently than I expected. Not defensive, not dismissive, just accepted. He leaned back slightly, older, smaller, like something inside him had finally settled. "I kept my promise," he said. There it was, the same sentence, the same belief, 14 years later, unchanged. "I know," I said, and I meant it, because he had. He had fed me, sheltered me, kept me alive, until the exact moment he said he would. "And I thought that was enough," he added. A pause. "I thought that was what mattered." I watched him carefully, because this was new, not the words, the awareness behind them. "But it wasn't," he said. "Not a question. A realization." "No," I replied, "it wasn't." Silence again. Longer this time, because truth takes space. "I didn't know how to love you," he said finally. The words were quiet, but they didn't need to be loud. "I wasn't your responsibility," I said. Not accusing, just correcting. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. You were. A pause, and I reduced that to a timeline. That sentence was the closest thing to an apology he could give. I didn't respond, because I wasn't here for that. Not anymore. Why did you help? He asked. There it was, the question that had been waiting. I looked past him for a moment, through the glass doors, at nothing in particular, just space. Then I answered, because he didn't push me out, a beat, and because you kept your promise. He looked at me, confused, maybe even surprised. I don't owe you love, I continued, but I acknowledge what you did. Another silence, but this one felt different, balanced. I'm grateful, I said, and I'm done. That was it. No anger, no forgiveness, no return, just clarity. He didn't argue, didn't try to stop me, didn't reach out, because for the first time, he understood something. This wasn't his decision anymore. Will I see you again? He asked quietly. I paused. Not long, just enough. No. The word didn't feel harsh. It felt accurate. He nodded, accepted it, like everything else. And then I turned, walked toward the exit, each step steady, unhurried, certain. Because this time, no door was closing on me. I was the one walking away, and I didn't look back, not because I was afraid, but because there was nothing left behind me. The next morning, everything felt the same, and completely different. The city moved like it always did. Cars, voices, deadlines, nothing had changed. But something inside me had. I went back to work, not because I needed distraction, but because that's where I belonged. My office, my space, my decisions. No one gave this to me, no one approved it, I built it. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to sit down and do nothing. Just breathe. Because for 14 years, I had been moving. Forward. Always forward. Not stopping. Not looking back. And now, there was nothing left chasing me. A soft knock on the door. My assistant stepped in. The board approved the final restructuring, she said. Of course they did. They want to extend your contract. I nodded. Send it later. She hesitated. There's one more thing, she added. I looked up. Your brother asked if you would visit again. A pause. Not heavy. Just real. Schedule it, I said, because that was a different answer. A different relationship. A different choice. That evening, I returned to the hospital. Same hallway, same room, but something had shifted. Not in the environment, in me. Kalis was awake. He looked at me and smiled. We're still here, he said. I nodded. For now. We didn't talk about money, didn't talk about business, didn't talk about the past. We talked about small things, books, weather, random memories, things that didn't matter, and somehow, that made them matter more. At one point, he looked at me and asked, Do you regret anything? I thought about it, not quickly, not automatically, because regret isn't simple. Then I answered, No. He smiled. Me neither, he said. A quiet understanding, not forced, not explained, just shared. As I stood up to leave, he spoke again. You didn't come back for him, he said. I paused. No. But you came back anyway. A beat. Yes. He nodded. That's enough. And somehow, it was. I walked out of the hospital that night, under a sky that looked exactly like the one I had left 14 years ago. But I wasn't the same person standing under it, not even close. Back then, I was someone waiting to be chosen, waiting to be accepted, waiting to be loved. Now, I was someone who chose herself, who built her own place, who understood her own value. And that difference changes everything. People think closure is loud, that it comes with apologies, tears, reunions. But sometimes, closure is quiet, a decision, a boundary, a door you walk past, without stopping. I never went back to that house, never called him father again, never tried to rebuild something that had never really existed. But I also didn't carry anger, didn't hold on to resentment, didn't need revenge. Because I had something better, clarity and control. And those two things are more powerful than anything you can take from someone. Before I end this, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? I'd really love to know. Because no matter where you are, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, like you were never chosen, like you had to build everything on your own, then maybe you understand this. You don't need someone else to give you a place in the world. You can build one, and when you do, no one can take it away from you again. That night, I stood by the window of my apartment, city lights below, quiet above. And for the first time, in a very long time, I wasn't thinking about what I lost. I was thinking about what I had built. And that was enough.